You know that rush the idea hits, your heart quickens, you feel unstoppable. Maybe it's at 6 a.m. after a podcast or 11:00 p.m. scrolling through success stories. Motivation arrives like a warm sun. It lights up possibility, and for a moment everything seems easy. But the sun sets, the podcast ends, and the real task is still there. Winners don't confuse that warm, temporary light with the steady power that actually changes lives. Motivation is the spark. Discipline is the steady flame that follows. Psychology gives us a simple map for why this is true. Motivation is an emotion. It's fueled by novelty, desire, and a surge of dopamine that makes future rewards seem immediate. Emotions move quickly. They're brilliant at starting things. But lasting change is built on repetition. Neuroscience tells us the brain rewires itself with repeated action. The first time you sit down to learn, your brain fights you. The 100th time, you've created new pathways, neural highways that make the action easier. That rewiring doesn't come from a feeling. It comes from discipline, the choice to show up again and again even when the initial feeling is gone. Philosophically, this distinction maps onto two ways of living. One is reactive. Wait for inspiration, respond to mood, chase peaks. The other is proactive. Design your days, enforce rules for yourself, and accept friction as part of growth. Stoic thinkers and modern psychologists converge here. Control the controllables. You can't control whether a burst of motivation will come tomorrow, but you can control what systems you put in place today to guarantee progress without it. Let's be practical. Willpower is a finite resource. Relying on it is like assuming you'll always have a full tank of gas. It's heroic for a night, but unsustainable for a lifetime. Discipline is not about heroic feats of endurance. It's about designing your environment so that the disciplined choice is the default. Put your running shoes by the bed, keep the tempting app off your home screen, schedule your writing time and guard it like a meeting with your most important client yourself. These are small, strategic moves that transform avoidance into habit and habit into identity. There's also a moral clarity to discipline that motivation lacks. Motivation can be selfish, I want to feel good. But discipline aligns with higher aims. It's not simply about making yourself feel motivated. It's about honoring the future person you want to become. When you act from discipline, you compound credibility with yourself. Each small victory strengthens your belief that you're the kind of person who finishes what they start. That belief is the engine of long-term success. Here's the paradox. Discipline gives you freedom. At first glance, discipline looks constraining. But every decision you automate, every habit you lock in frees up mental energy and time for creative, high-leverage work. You stop wasting willpower on trivial choices and start investing it where it multiplies. The disciplined person isn't deprived. They're liberated to pursue bigger objectives because the fundamentals are already secured. Finally, remember that discipline is practiced, not preached. It's an exercise in consistency, not severity. If you miss a day, don't make it an identity crisis. Reset. Show up the next day and protect the rhythm. The aim is not perfection, but persistence. Over time, persistence accumulates into transformation. Motivation may have opened the door, but discipline is what builds the house. So the next time you feel the sparkle of inspiration, be grateful and then ask yourself what system will make that spark unnecessary. Build the routines, shape the environment, and train the small muscles of self-control. That's how winners operate, not as slaves to fleeting feelings, but as architects of their destiny. Act now, show up once more than you feel like, and you will surprise yourself tomorrow. Think about the smallest repeated choices you make every day: the cup of coffee, the 5 minutes you spend scrolling, the decision to read one page, to stand instead of sit. Those microscopic actions aren't trivial, they're the raw material of identity. Habits don't merely change your schedule, they whisper to your brain who you are, and slowly, insistently, that whisper becomes a declaration. The person who flosses nightly tells themselves silently, I'm the kind of person who cares for their health. The person who writes 300 words before breakfast tells themselves, "I'm a writer." Over time, those whispers become the voice you answer to. Psychology helps us see why this matters so much. Self-perception theory suggests we infer our attitudes and beliefs from our own behavior. You don't always wait to feel like a runner before you run, and in running you adopt the identity. Cognitive dissonance plays along. When actions and self-image conflict, the mind prefers coherence. It prefers a story where your actions align with your identity, so when you act consistently, even in the absence of a dramatic emotional surge, your brain updates what it believes about you. Small victories accumulate into a new, sturdier sense of self. There's a philosophical depth here too. Virtue ethics, going back to Aristotle, teaches that character is formed by repeated action. You become courageous by doing courageous things. You become disciplined by practicing discipline. The modern phrase identity-based habits is simply packages that ancient insight into a practical tool. Decide who you want to be, then prove it to yourself each day with consistent behavior. The moral arc of your life bends not on grand declarations, but on tiny acts performed consistently. Now, this has practical consequences. When habits shape identity, they reframe setbacks. A missed workout stops being a sign that you're not a gym person and becomes an isolated event in the life of someone who, by and large, shows up. That reframing prevents the catastrophic leap from failure to identity collapse, which is exactly what kills momentum. Winners design habits that support the identity they aim for, and they let that identity cushion them during lapses. They understand identity is not fragile. It's forged through practice. There's also leverage in the directionality of change. Most people try to change behavior first, hoping identity follows. That works, but it's slow and vulnerable to motivation dips. A more powerful route is to clarify identity first. I am someone who learns every day, and then choose tiny behaviors that are non-threatening but consistent. The behavior becomes evidence for the identity, and the identity makes the behavior easier. It's a positive feedback loop. Habits reinforce identity. Identity reduces friction. Lower friction makes habits stick. We should also talk about social identity. The groups you inhabit amplify this process. Humans are tribal by design. We mirror the norms of the people around us. Surrounding yourself with people who embody the identity you want accelerates habit formation. You begin to adopt language, routines, and even posture that align with that tribe. That's why another person's presence can be a quiet but powerful strategy for becoming who you want to be. Finally, recognize this. Identity is not fixed. It's malleable, sculpted by repetition. If you don't like who you are, you don't need permission or a monumental willpower surge. You need a series of deliberate, tiny acts. Start with what's small enough to do even on your worst day. Each repetition is a vote for the new version of you. Over weeks and months, those votes add up into a majority that transforms how you think, speak, and act. So don't wait to feel like the person you wish to be. Act like them in the small things, and let those small things rewrite your story. Your identity is not discovered. It is built, one choice at a time. Decide who you want to be today, cast one small vote in that direction, and never underestimate the quiet power of repetition. Think about a long-term goal: writing a book, losing weight, building a business. Most people imagine it as a single dramatic event, the marathon, the launch, the bestseller moment. That image feels exciting because it's cinematic, but the truth is far less glamorous and far more reliable. Greatness is the result of tiny choices stacked day after day. Small, consistent actions beat big, occasional efforts because they exploit time, reduce friction, and rewire who you are at the root level. Psychology gives us the mechanics. Humans overweight immediate rewards and underestimate slow, steady gains. That's called present bias. We prefer something small and now over something bigger later. The antidote isn't more willpower, it's structural change. When you commit to a tiny repeatable behavior, 5 push-ups, 1 paragraph, 1 sales outreach, you align the reward system to accept gradual improvement. Dopamine responds to progress, not to scale. Even a single incremental win releases enough neurochemical feedback to keep you coming back. Over weeks and months, those micro wins compound into outcomes that look, in hindsight, dramatic. Economically, think of it as compound interest on effort. A 1% improvement every day compounds into a massive change over a year. The math is simple and mercilessly true. Small edges accumulate. The person who does a little more than yesterday, consistently, will outpace the person who goes all out intermittently. Intensity without consistency is like sprinting in a circle. You burn energy but don't move the needle long term. Philosophically, this is an argument for process over peaks. Stoic thinkers taught that excellence is found in daily practice, not in fleeting ecstasies. Modern athletes and artists echo the same. The real work happens in repetition, in the grind that nobody sees. The body and mind adapt to what you ask of them regularly. Asking for too much, too fast, invites injury, shame, and dropout. Asking for a little every day invites growth, mastery, and identity change. There's practical wisdom here too. Big, occasional efforts are often motivated by guilt last. It bursts to fix months of neglect. That creates volatile performance and burnout. Small, consistent actions, by contrast, minimize friction. They make the starting point trivial. When the action is tiny, resistance is reduced. Our brain's default is to conserve energy. Making the first step tiny tricks the brain into compliance. Over time, you can scale the habit because it's anchored. Start with a 2-minute habit and let momentum do the heavy lifting. The social dimension matters as well. Consistency produces credibility with others and with yourself. People notice habits more than big one-time deeds because habits are visible in the long run. Your reputation is built by what you do repeatedly. The entrepreneur who emails 3 potential clients a day builds a pipeline. The person who calls for a week and then disappears builds nothing. Winners recognize that reputation compounds just like results. Small, reliable actions create trust and opportunity. There's also a resilience effect. When your progress is incremental, setbacks are easier to absorb. If you've been consistent for months, a bad day is a blip, not a derailment. Sudden, heroic efforts followed by collapse create an identity tied to extremes. I'm all in, or I failed. Steady effort cultivates equanimity and long-term engagement. It makes the system robust. So what does this look like in practice? Pick a non-threatening unit of progress. Define it so small you can't say no. Track it, because the act of recording turns vague intentions into commitments. Protect the time and remove friction points that will make consistency painful. Celebrate micro wins not because the trophy matters, but because the reinforcement cements the loop. In the end, mastery is boring at the surface but fierce underneath. The person who wins is rarely the one who trains the hardest for a week. It's the one who trains a little every day for a decade. Small choices, repeated, that's the architecture of excellence. Start today with one tiny action you can repeat tomorrow. Over time, those small choices will build a life you once thought required miracles. Goals are seductive. They give you a target to stare at, a trophy to imagine, a finish line to dream about. But goals alone are fragile. They tell you where to go, not how to get there. Winners understand that the distance between desire and achievement is paved with systems, repeatable processes, habits, constraints, and feedback loops that transform aspiration into routine. While a goal is a destination, a system is the vehicle that gets you there reliably, even on days when motivation is absent. Psychologically, goals activate the reward centers of the brain. They create urgency and excitement. That surge can kickstart behavior, but it often fizzles because the brain prioritizes immediate reward over delayed payoff. Systems, by contrast, are engineered to produce small, regular rewards that keep the brain engaged. A daily writing routine yields the immediate psychological confirmation of "I wrote today." That tiny confirmation feeds back into your identity and sustains action. You don't depend on a single cliff-edge moment of inspiration. You build a mechanism that produces consistent returns. Philosophically, this is an argument for process ethics over outcome worship. The Stoics taught that virtue resides in what you control, your actions and choices, not in external results. Systems are an application of that wisdom. They redirect attention away from distant, uncontrollable outcomes and toward proximate, controllable behavior. When you center your life on systems, you become resilient to variability. Luck, timing, and external noise matter less because your day-to-day processes keep moving the needle. There's also a design element to systems. Goals are passive. Systems are active engineering. You design workflows, set constraints, create triggers, and remove friction. If your goal is to get fitter, the system is the detailed plan. Scheduled gym time, meal prep on Sundays, sleep prioritization, a workout split that prevents injury, and progress metrics that aren't just the scale. If your goal is to grow revenue, the system is your weekly cadence of outreach, follow-up scripts, A/B testing, and customer feedback loops. Systems make decisions in advance, so you conserve willpower in the moment. One of the most powerful advantages of systems is they convert randomness into habit. Instead of relying on heroic effort, you make the desired behavior inevitable. Think of a simple trigger, leaving your guitar on a stand in the middle of the room. That environmental nudge removes the friction of setup and makes practice the default choice. Systems are often mundane and boring, but their boringness is their strength. They turn initiation costs into inertia for action. Measurement is another core feature. Goals without metrics are wishes. Systems include feedback loops that tell you whether the process is working and where to adjust. This is where iteration happens. Failures are simply data. If outreach numbers are low, you tweak the script. If your sleep is poor, you recalibrate your evening routine. Systems encourage experimentation in the context of stability. You don't abandon the whole ship because one sailed tore. You patch it and continue. There's a social dimension as well. Systems scale when embedded in culture. Teams succeed when they adopt shared processes. Daily stand-ups, code review rituals, customer onboarding flows, because those systems distribute responsibility and create predictable outcomes. On an individual level, systems create accountability. A buddy system, a public commit, or a scheduled check-in translates private intentions into public obligations. That social layer multiplies the system's effectiveness. Finally, remember that systems are not antithetical to ambition. They are the architecture of it. Big dreams need small, repeatable acts to become real. Start by identifying the smallest set of behaviors that produce progress. Make them non-negotiable for a defined period. Measure, iterate, and protect the routine from distractions. Over time, the system compounds, and the results that once seemed like miracles become the logical consequence of a well-designed process. Build systems that make your desired future inevitable. Your goals will follow as a natural byproduct. Act now. Design one simple system today and commit to it for 30 days. You might think success is a test of willpower, that the person who wants it most simply grits their teeth and powers through temptation. That's a compelling story because it gives credit where we like to believe credit belongs, to heroic effort. But psychology and lived experience tell a different tale. Willpower is real, but it's exhaustible, noisy, and unreliable when left as the last line of defense. Environment, by contrast, is silent, steady, and far more powerful. Winners shape their surroundings so that the disciplined choice is the easy choice, and in doing so they stop fighting themselves every single day. Consider how the brain economizes energy. Our minds are wired to take short-cuts, heuristics that preserve cognitive resources. Each decision you make taxes that finite reservoir. That's why every tiny choice adds up into decision fatigue. When your environment is cluttered with temptations, you're forced to spend willpower resisting them. When your environment nudges you toward the right action, you expend far less mental energy to do the same thing. The result is predictably simple. Design the world so it favors the outcomes you want, and you'll need less raw willpower to show up. This idea isn't theoretical. Think of the athlete who places their training gear where it's visible the moment they wake, or the writer who dedicates a room with a desk and nothing else to do but write. Those aren't acts of superstition. They're intentional reductions of friction. The fewer barriers between you and the action, the more likely you are to perform it consistently. Remove the decision, and you remove the excuse. Philosophically, this flips the locus of responsibility from a heroic inner struggle to a wise outer design. Stoicism teaches us to control what we can. Environment is a controllable lever. If you cannot control a passing mood, control the context that will shape how you respond to that mood. Instead of waiting for resolve, create conditions where resolve becomes unnecessary. That's not evasion, it's strategic intelligence. It's the difference between trying to swim upstream forever and building a dam that channels the current where you want it to flow. There's also a social layer to environment. Humans are highly influenced by norms and cues in their social circle. If everyone around you reads, trains, or shows up on time, you will naturally mirror those behaviors. That's why your peer group can be the most powerful form of environmental design. Choose your tribe purposefully. If you want to be a leader, spend time with leaders. If you want to be disciplined, surround yourself with disciplined people. Social proof silently recalibrates what you consider normal and attainable. Environmental design works because it bypasses scarcity and taps into momentum. When you set systems, tidy workspaces, scheduled blocks of time, preset healthy meals, app restrictions you convert once, difficult actions into automatic responses, small nudges compound into habits. Over time, you're not constantly defending against temptation. You're living in a world that gently shepherds you toward your goals. This doesn't mean willpower is useless. It's the spark that helps you change your environment in the first place. But after that initial exertion, you should use willpower sparingly and strategically to set up systems, to place the first brick, to have the uncomfortable conversation that moves you into a better context. Once the environment is aligned with your goals, willpower becomes supplemental rather than foundational. Practical steps are straightforward. Audit your day and remove obvious friction points for the behaviors you want. Make good options visible and convenient. Make bad options invisible and inconvenient. If you want to write, make your keyboard the default choice. If you want to eat better, pre-cook meals and remove trigger foods from the house. If you want focus, create a dedicated workspace and eliminate common distractions. Small, consistent edits to your physical and social environment produce outsized returns. In the end, winners win not because they are infinitely strong. They win because they are intelligently prepared. They build a world that makes success the path of least resistance. And when the inevitable hard days come, the environment holds them steady. Change your surroundings, and you change your future. There's a paradox at the heart of high performance that most people miss. The more you restrict yourself through disciplined practice, the more freedom you actually create. It sounds counterintuitive because discipline feels like a leash in the moment. Skip dessert, wake up early, say no to a party. These are constraints, but constraints aren't punishments, they're investments. Each disciplined act is a deposit into a bank of choice that pays interest in clarity, time, and opportunity. Over months and years, those deposits compound, and suddenly you're free to pursue things you only dreamed about when your life was chaotic and reactive. Psychology explains this beautifully. Human attention is limited. Every unstructured decision you leave for the day is mental overhead, a tiny tax on your energy. When you automate decisions through routine, you remove that tax. The famous example is the person who wears the same style outfit every day. They've freed up cognitive bandwidth for creative and strategic thinking. Discipline compresses low-value choices into automatic behavior so your executive function can focus on high-leverage problems. That's freedom. More of your best thinking goes where it matters. Philosophically, the discipline-freedom relationship is ancient and profound. Philosophers from the Stoics to modern existentialists argued that true freedom isn't the absence of limits, but the capacity to act in line with your values. When you discipline yourself around what matters, you stop being a slave to impulses and social noise. You create a life in which your choices are directed, not scattered. You sacrifice some short-term ease for long-term sovereignty. In other words, you become the author of your days rather than a character in someone else's story. There's also a practical causal chain. Discipline builds competence. Competence opens doors. Doors open options. Options are what freedom looks like in real life. A writer who disciplines herself to produce a paragraph a day develops a portfolio, a craft, and the ability to pitch and publish. A leader who disciplines their calendar to protect deep work produces results that generate influence and choices about what projects to take. In each case, the daily constraint creates future latitude. You don't get freedom by avoiding work, you get it by doing the right work consistently. Emotionally, discipline cultivates confidence. Every consistent act is proof you can be trusted. When you promise yourself a task and keep it repeatedly, you build a relationship with yourself that's reliable. That internal trust reduces anxiety and indecision. With less internal friction, you move faster and with more conviction. That speed and clarity are liberating. They let you say yes to opportunities that align with your goals and no to distractions without second guessing. This isn't about austere self-flagellation. Discipline done poorly is rigid and joyless. The point is strategic discipline, aligning constraints with values so they amplify joy rather than suppress it. If family matters, discipline your calendar so family time is protected and meaningful. If fitness matters, discipline your environment and routine so health becomes automatic and not a daily battle. The freedom you gain should enlarge your capacity to enjoy and create, not diminish it. Let's be blunt about execution. Start with non-negotiables, a small set of behaviors that, if done consistently, will produce outsized outcomes. Protect those behaviors like appointments with your future self. Track them, because measurement translates vague intentions into concrete accountability. Use friction intentionally, make bad options harder, good options easier. And when you fail, treat it as information, not identity. Discipline is a practice. You get better by returning to it, not by perfect adherence. In the end, winners use discipline as a tool of liberation. They don't see routines as cages, but as scaffolding that raises them to higher possibilities. They accept short-term constraints because they understand the geometry of life. Control the base habits, and the rest grows upward. The paradox dissolves when you realize discipline and freedom are not opposites but partners in a life well lived. Choose the small disciplines today. They will provide the freedom you want tomorrow.